Hey guys, and welcome back to the Ketogenic Nutritionist channel. I'm so honored you're here. If you haven't already, hit subscribe for all the new things weight loss related, ketogenic, low carb related. This is the place to be. And again, it is my pleasure that you're joining me today. I'm going to be talking about something that a lot of controversy surrounds, right? And so I want to talk about this because this is my personal story and I feel really obligated to share this. This is the whole reason I got into the ketogenic low carb space. This is a whole reason my passion was ignited to help others in this space, to help women lose weight, to help women and men reverse insulin resistance and chronic disease. And I want to tell you about it because I don't believe without this experience in my life, I would be where I'm at today. It was truly life changing for me. So, today's episode, I'm going to tell you how I reversed my PCOS by reversing my insulin resistance and therefore went on to lose 60 pounds and conceive naturally. Now, I said that this is controversial because there's a lot of physicians and OBGYNs and people out there that don't believe PCOS is reversible and don't believe that these conditions can literally be put into quote unquote remission. And there are a lot of great ones that do believe this. And so I want to tell you the exact methods that I use to do that. And so I also want to kind of explain that this is not medical advice. I am just purely telling you guys my story. Yes, I'm a registered dietitian. Yes, I help women do the same exact thing, but you always need to talk to your doctor because individual situations apply here. And it's just important that you work with your medical team. So let's get into it. This was about, I would say, about 7 to 8 years ago. I played college soccer. It was fantastic. I loved being an athlete all my life. And I played all the things. I played softball, soccer, basketball, and I ran track. And I think a lot of my athleticism really masked a lot of my eating habits and a lot of the symptoms that came with that in early childhood. So, yes, I was a chunkier kid. Yes, I was significantly heavier than my peers, but I wasn't quote unquote obese or abnormally overweight. I was thicker, I was heavier, I weighed more than everyone else, but I wasn't like, it wasn't super concerning at the time. And again, I do believe that was because I was constantly getting shuttled from practice to practice. I was running all the time, I was lifting weights, all of it. I think a lot of my symptoms were masked by that sheer level of activity. So I grew up in South Mississippi, home of all the good foods. My parents were excellent cooks. My grandfather was a fantastic cook and it was indulgent. It was indulgent food. It was sweet. It was sugary. It was fatty. It was all the delicious things. We grew up next to Louisiana, got all the Cajun food. It was amazing. And I think some of that is another reason why I may have had some of the weight issues that I had as well, just because the food, I didn't necessarily eat a super healthy diet when I was a kid either. So anyway, fast forward a bit, went into college a little bit heavier than my peers, was playing college soccer, and started to notice things were a little bit off hormonally, right? My cycle was starting to skip. I was starting to get acne and a little bit of like mood issues. I was starting to lose a lot of hair. I've got a lot of hair. I was losing a lot of hair. And I started to notice a little bit of chin hairs, right? And so anybody that knows anything about PCOS, you know, hirsutism, if I'm saying that right, is very common in women with PCOS. You basically lose the hair on your head and grow hair on your face. It is so awful. It's so awful. And so I was starting to notice these things. I was like, something is off. Like I'm not having a period for months at a time, Anyone, you got to know this too. Women, your period is your superpower. This is a very, very good marker of your reproductive health. If you're having a period monthly, this is a good sign things are on track hormonally. And that was not happening for me. So I think I was about a sophomore, junior in college. I went to the school's nurse and I said, hey, something's off. I'm not having a period. Something's going on. I'm not on birth control at this point. Nothing was going on in that realm. And I was very nervous. I was gaining weight, even more weight than I was already heavier. I was gaining even more weight. And I remember she said, okay, it's probably because you're an athlete and you're working out all the time. You're lifting weights, you're running, all of this. This is why you are not having a period. And so they put me on birth control. And I thought, oh, birth control. I knew nothing at the time. I had no idea this was not a root cause solution. I had no idea that this was literally slapping a Band-Aid. I had no idea that this wasn't going to fix anything. It was just going to mask my symptoms and have a fake birth control induced period essentially. And so I got on birth control and, you know, I was having the regular birth control bleeds, and I thought things were okay. So I went on the next couple years, still having a lot of the same symptoms that I was having, still losing a ton of hair when I was combing my hair out in the shower, getting cystic acne. I was having a lot of mood swings, a lot of lack of motivation. I was still kind of gaining weight on the heavier side. And I started to study to become a registered dietitian. So even as I was studying to become a registered dietitian, I was learning things. I was learning, eat more grains, do more whole foods, all of that. I was slowly incorporating a lot of the things I was learning, but I wasn't seeing much change with my weight. I was eating more whole grains. I switched from white bread to wheat bread. I was doing the things I was kind of taught in the conventional medicine world of nutrition. And again, nothing was really happening weight wise and or symptomatic wise. So fast forward a little bit, I graduated with a dietetics degree. I went on to do my internship in Florida. So I moved from Tennessee to Florida, started working as a registered or a student dietitian, whatever, intern. And this is when it got progressively worse. So I wasn't running and playing soccer and running 90 minutes at a time anymore. Now I was sitting in a hospital studying, learning how to be a registered dietitian, and I was significantly less active. Now, I've always had a place for physical activity in my heart, so I would go for occasional runs and lift weights and stuff, but I was certainly not near as active as I was in college, and that is when I seemingly gained 30, 45 pounds overnight. I can remember waking up and my clothes weren't fitting. I remember we wore white coats to the hospital, and my white coat started to feel tight, and it was horrible. And I was thinking, I have really not changed my eating patterns. I'm eating really healthy. I was eating whole grain wraps, and I was doing like all the health, eating a ton of fruit, eating vegetables, doing all this. And I was still gaining weight. And I, at this point, started to implement some other things that I thought would be helpful. Like I started to calorie count a little bit. I started to even go a little bit more on the vegetarian like side. And that really wasn't helping either. And I still continued to pack on weight. So as a student dietitian, I was gaining weight, and I was becoming increasingly frustrated because here I am counseling others about their weight, and I can't even lose this weight that I've gained. And so I become a registered dietitian. I'm still feeling really uncomfortable in my body. I'm still at this point, I did get off birth control about a year into my internship because I just felt terrible and it wasn't helping anything. I still never regained a period. So I got off birth control. My period just never came back. And so about a year and a half later, I passed my registered dietitian exam, became a registered dietitian, and started working. And I met my husband or soon to be husband at that point. And I started thinking, golly, I don't have a period. If I marry this man, I would really love to have children. What is going on? This is just not right. And so I went to an OBGYN and wanted to get my hormones tested. At this point, I knew a little bit more about hormones, not much as a baby dietitian, but I knew something was still not right. I had been off birth control now for like 6 or 7 months and my period was just not back. I was still getting the hirsutism and the hair loss, all this stuff. And I went to this OBGYN. I remember this like it was yesterday. I walked in, met them, got my labs drawn, came back for a follow-up appointment. I remember him saying to me, "You have PCOS, very classic. You're going to have a very hard time conceiving. Your numbers are really, really off. Once you decide you want to get pregnant, come back and I'll give you assistance in getting pregnant, Clomid and IUI, whatever we needed at the time." He essentially told me I wasn't going to be able to get pregnant naturally. And I asked him, I said, "Is there anything I can do about this? In the meantime, I would really love to like stay off medications. I don't really want to be on birth control." Of course, the OBGYN told me at that point I needed to do metformin and spironolactone, classic PCOS medications that we know we use to lower androgens. And the metformin, well, we know what that's for. It's a type 2 diabetes medication, but they also use it for PCOS as well. And he said, "You can get on those, that these may help a little bit, but you're still going to have trouble conceiving." And so I'm like, okay, well, is there anything else I can do diet wise, lifestyle wise? What are the natural treatment options? And I got nothing. I mean, talk about crickets. It was crickets from the sky. And he said, "Well, you can go look up this and that and whatever else," and nothing. And so I left, and I remember thinking that day, this is not going to be my story. I'm going to figure out what's going on with my body, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this and heal this. This is frustrating. I'm glad I know what's going on, but this is not going to be the end of this. And so I started looking up everything I could get my hands on, healing PCOS naturally, diet, therapeutic lifestyles for PCOS, all of this. And around the same time, I'm working full time at a hospital as a registered dietitian. I work for the VA hospital. I love veterans. And I was working at the VA hospital in Bay Pines. And a company, I don't know if you would call them a company, but a group, a research group called Virta Health, VIRTA, Virta Health. They're here on YouTube. They're fantastic. They did a pilot study with veterans in the ketogenic diet, and they came to my hospital, and they were enrolled, or they weren't necessarily local at my hospital, but they were doing telemedicine. I was enrolling veterans at my hospital, and for type 2 diabetes, and they were using a ketogenic diet and studying a ketogenic diet. And so I enrolled several of my veterans, and the results were jaw dropping. I kid you not, I was astounded at the results. Veterans were getting off all insulin, all oral diabetes medications. They were losing 60 to 80 pounds. I mean, just absolutely crazy results. I was so shocked. I could not believe what I was seeing. And at this point, I had read enough about PCOS, and I had heard people reference this as diabetes of the ovaries, and it's insulin resistance related. And so I put the two together. I'm thinking Virta Health is over here healing these veterans of type 2 diabetes. They're getting off all medications. Their A1Cs are going from 6.9 to a 5.1. Like, I have never seen anything like this in my life. And at this point, I had been counseling veterans for years and years and years, and I wasn't seeing results like this with conventional nutrition treatment. And so I was like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try a ketogenic diet. I'm going to figure out how to do this right, and I'm going to see if anything happens. And so I set my mind to it. I'm going to do a ketogenic diet. I went and bought all the groceries. I started tracking my foods using the Carb Manager app. And within the first month of a ketogenic diet, my period returned, and I lost like 10 to 12 pounds. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is wild. This is wild. Why have I struggled with my hormones for so long? And no one has ever explained to me anything. So of course, I've got my hands on the book, Why We Get Sick by Dr. Bigman, who I had on the show earlier. You go check out his interview. He's phenomenal. I've read the book, The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, another phenomenal book. And I would love to have him on as a guest as well. And I was getting my hands on everything I could, and I was implementing all of this stuff. I started doing a little bit of intermittent fasting, prioritizing protein, and getting rid of these simple sugars. And my period returned. I started losing weight, but more so than that, I started getting rid of these symptoms that I was ailing with. Like, my cystic acne went away. My mood was so much better. I started to sleep better. My day-to-day life was just changed dramatically. And that nothing had ever done that for me. Not metformin, not spironolactone, certainly not birth control. And I remember thinking in my head, that's it. Like, I've got to get this information out. I've got to tell everyone how I feel. Too many women suffer with PCOS for no reason. Like, it's just, they need to know. They need to know that there is hope in PCOS. There's hope to lose weight. There's hope to conceive naturally. There's hope. And so not long after I got my period returned, I was able to have ovulation return, and I was able to get pregnant naturally after I had been married for, I don't know, about a year with my biological daughter, and had a perfect pregnancy, had a perfect nursing experience, had no issues with breastfeeding, which a lot of women with PCOS have issues with their milk supply, had no issues. I had no gestational diabetes, none of that, had no anything wrong. And I was just so blown away. I continued following a lower carb diet throughout my pregnancy, and really watched and managed my blood glucose levels. And so it was amazing. And so that's essentially kind of the backstory of how I reversed and put my PCOS in remission. Now, some of the more action step items, and take some notes, write these things down, put in the comments, if you have any questions about any of these steps. But essentially, the steps I took was I started tracking my food, right? I started eating a lower calorie diet and started tracking my food to make sure I wasn't going overboard. That's step one. Step two is I prioritized protein at every meal. Protein was the most important macronutrient at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was not going to eat anything over protein first. I was going to make sure that I got my protein macronutrients in for sure. Number three is I started making lifestyle changes for my PCOS. I stopped doing a lot of HIIT activity. So I was going to CrossFit, and I was doing like F45 type workouts before I got the PCOS diagnosis, and even in the beginning of my PCOS diagnosis, and I realized that that was really increasing my cortisol and causing some issues. So I slowed things down. I started doing more like resistance training and like walking, jogging, just slower things that weren't going to hit my cortisol levels and cause my body stress so much. I started implementing fasting and intermittent fasting, and what I would do differently. So at the beginning, I was skipping breakfast, but I would not do that again. My views on fasting, intermittent fasting, have changed a little bit as a dietitian, as a practicing dietitian who's now seen over 5,000 clients in practice. I don't really think women should be fasting every morning, skipping breakfast. I think that can lead to hormonal issues. And I was doing that back then. I have switched my fasting routine now to more of a pulling dinner up earlier and having dinner kind of like in the mid-afternoon and then calling it, and then not really eating much of a dinner at night. And then I really started prioritizing sleep. So that's another thing that I didn't realize was as important as it is, right? When you lack on sleep, when you don't sleep, your blood glucose goes up and it can lead to insulin resistance. And so I started wearing blue light blocking glasses. I started turning off the TV. I stopped looking at my phone. I stopped listening to stressful things at night that were going to keep me up and keep my thoughts raging. I started keeping like a notepad by my bed in case I thought of something I needed to write down in the middle of the night. And so I started implementing sleep hygiene. Mouth tape came later, but I would definitely recommend mouth tape to someone now. And then lastly, I did use supplements, right? Ovasitol. I used Theralogic's Ovasitol, and I did use berberine to some degree. Remember, none of this is medical advice. I'm just telling you my story. And so some supplements that helped there. Magnesium was definitely helpful as well. Magnesium glycinate. And so those were some things that I implemented there as well that helped me get my PCOS in remission. That this was all about 7 years ago. I've never lab wise been able to be clinically diagnosed with PCOS since then. So I've always gotten my yearly checkup, my DHEA, my testosterone pulled. They've always looked at my LH and my FSH ratio, all of that, my fasting insulin, all of that has never even hinted or indicated that I've ever even had PCOS or am having issues with it, again, because I have maintained this lifestyle. And so I say all that to say, again, you can do this. There's hope with this. And I'm in your corner, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Subscribe to my channel and leave a comment if you need anything. Again, my name is Temple Stewart. I go by the Ketogenic Nutritionist, and I hope that this was helpful. I hope if you're someone with PCOS or dealing with some of these things, that you can put some of these action items into practice and find some relief for what you're going through. Because believe me, I get it. And it's not something that's easy to deal with. And so anyway, I will sign off on that one. I'm here for you guys. And again, thanks for being here.